We're back after a long layoff. It's been about 4 months since we've done a video. The last video that we did was a Jason actors ranking, and I think I want to keep that train moving right along with a movie ranking. Some things happened in that time to cause the delay of my return. We moved 2 hours away from where we were previously living, and also in that time something else happened. Ted White, my favorite Jason actor, passed away, and I want to dedicate this video to the memory of Ted White. Coming in at number 12, this was an easy one. Jason X. Jason in Space. Need I say more? Not only did New Line Cinema not actually give a shit about this movie, aside from a means to keep Jason fans busy while they worked on Freddy vs. Jason, and to make a little money in the process, this movie is just bad. Everything from the story, the writing, the dialogue, and especially the aesthetic. This movie looks like a bad episode of Power Rangers. Some people thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and more power to them, and some people believe that this movie has a so bad it's good quality. I don't. I absolutely despise this movie. It's got some good kills in it, but honestly, I don't even care. This movie it's an insult to the Friday the 13th franchise and an insult to Jason Voorhees. My number 11 is another New Line entry into the series, Jason Goes to Hell. New Line Cinema's first foray into the Friday the 13th series after acquiring the rights from Paramount. It was merely the first time that the home of Freddy Krueger would demonstrate its complete and total lack of knowledge of the franchise, the history, the lore, and what the fans wanted to see. This movie was just something that New Line pushed out of their rectum to tide over Jason fans, while Freddy vs. Jason remained in developmental hell for another decade. My number 8 might be controversially low for many of you. A lot of people love this movie, especially people in the Freddy camp. And make no mistake about it, I'm a Freddy guy too. I hope to inevitably get some Nightmare stuff up on this channel as well. Robert Englund turns in his best portrayal of Freddy since Dream Master, maybe even Dream Warriors in this film, so it's easy to see why Freddy fans would be biased towards this movie. It's a fun little movie, but something about it just doesn't work for me. I don't know if it's the characters or the story. I don't really consider it canon to either franchise, to a fact that I almost forget to rank it sometimes, and I almost didn't even put it in this video. And Ken Kirzinger, nothing against the man personally, but I consider him an abject failure as Jason. My number 9 is going to be highly controversial, to the fact that many of you are probably going to turn this video off when I say this. I didn't become fanatical about horror during the 2000s remake craze, or even the late 90s Scream craze. I've been fed this shit since I was learning my ABCs. I had a West Coast Video membership card in the early 90s, and I lived in the horror VHS section. And to me, right or wrong, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the Paramount films, the first 8 films of this series, are Friday the 13th to me. And nothing has come along since then that has changed my mind about that. Even a technically more superior film can lack tone and essence. Next on the list is the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. This movie's strength is, in my opinion, the most important ingredient of a Friday the 13th movie, and that is the Jason portrayal. I think that Derek Mears is a brutal, vicious, intelligent, efficient version of Jason Voorhees. I think he is the most deadly version of Jason Voorhees we've ever seen. I like the fact that he's a man in this, apparently anyway, for most of the movie, and he uses a tunnel system under the camp which is a logical way to explain how a human Jason could seem to teleport and move around so quickly, which he seems to do without explanation in many of the other movies. You may think, well, if you like all that, what's your problem? To me, this movie lacks the true spirit of what I think of when I think of a Friday the 13th movie. This movie is heavily influenced by the 2000s remake craze, which was kicked off by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake in 2003. They even brought in the same director, Marcus Nispel, to direct this film. The look, the feel, the atmosphere, the cinematography, to me, is all much more reminiscent of a 2000s era Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake and prequel than a Friday the 13th film. For all the great things I could say about this movie, there are just some things that do not do it for me. Honestly, I've probably turned this film on more to watch America Olivo rub oil on her tits than for any other reason. Number 8. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. By any logical measurement, should this film be lower on the list? Absolutely. We've already talked about this film numerous times on the channel, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It really does have almost everything going against it. Misleading title, misleading marketing. The only thing it really does have going for it is Kane Hodder's portrayal as Jason. I have a soft spot for it, though, as it was the newest film in the series when I first discovered the franchise. It is by far the weakest installment of the Paramount films, which, as I stated previously, I consider the true core franchise. Number 7, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. Roy Burns, the OG slasher imposter. This movie gets a lot of heat for Jason Voorhees not being the killer, but this movie doesn't do anything to disrespect Jason Voorhees, unlike another franchise and another movie we'll talk about at a later date. This movie has some great things going for it, some great kills, some whodunit action, and of course, Debbie Voorhees. Number 6, the OG, Friday the 13th from 1980. Honestly, the Pamela Voorhees reveal and Betsy Palmer's performance pretty much make this movie for me. Up to that point, it's kind of a slow burn and almost boring at times, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's got some excellent special effects done by Tom Savini and a phenomenal performance by Betsy Palmer. Number 5, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, the debut of Kane Hodder as Jason. With everything wrong with this movie due to MPAA meddling, there's actually a lot to love about this movie. Kane Hodder's portrayal as Jason, some phenomenal stunt work, an absolutely incredible looking Jason, and I also really enjoy the fight and the showdown between Tina and Jason. Number 4, Friday the 13th Part 3, the debut of the hulking hockey mask Jason that we've known ever since. Richard Brooker's portrayal of Jason kind of makes this movie for me. There is a subplot and a flashback scene in this movie that implies that Jason may have in fact raped Chris. There is a sadistic edge in Brooker's portrayal not seen in any other portrayal of Jason that I really love. Number 3, Friday the 13th Part 2. For most of my life, and up until very recently, this was my second favorite movie in the franchise. It is the debut of the sack-wearing adult Jason. It also features the greatest final girl in the series and one of the greatest final girls in slasher movie history, Ginny. And also features probably my favorite scene in the entire series, the sweater scene. This movie is an absolute classic with endless rewatchability for me. My number 2 is a lot of people's number 1, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Over the last year and a half or so, I've been watching this one by far the most out of any other movie in the series. It took me putting on a few extra years to really appreciate the tonal change and comedic nature of this film. I always preferred the darker nature of the first 4 films, and if you asked me my ranking when I was a kid, or even as recently as 5 years ago, this movie would have been sufficiently lower. It just goes to show that you're never too old to look at something with new eyes, and you're never too old to change your mind about something. I don't want to go too far in depth with this movie at all because I'm really, really looking forward to doing a Part 6 Bustin' review. Having said all that, my number one, still in my opinion, the supreme Jason movie, Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. The best kills, the best Jason, the best story, the best characters. It takes everything that was done great in 3 and does it even better. To me, it is the definitive Jason movie, and I don't think it'll ever be knocked off its perch as my number one Friday the 13th movie. Well, there you have it. There is my ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise, and I will see you guys for the next one.